Sweden aims for net zero by 2045, which is 5 years earlier than the overall net zero goal for the EU. Transport sector is very important for this, as the transport sector is about 30% of Sweden's total greenhouse gas emissions, and road transport is around 90% of that. So these are very, very important numbers, and this is an important sector in order to reach net zero. So the study's main aim is to understand how climate policy, market-based climate policy, so increases in fuel prices, impact a brown sector, a sector that has quite high or very high emission intensities, and how that sector is able to reduce these. So what we look at is, if we look from 2007 until 2019, the time period during which Sweden had some dramatic increases in fuel prices, and we look at how did companies react to that. In particular, we are able to trace each trucking company's truck and see how much did they drive with each truck. So before 2024, we had basically a somewhat constant increase in fuel prices, and since January 2024, we've seen a considerable decrease in fuel prices. So basically, the fact that one reduced the biofuel mandate, reduktionsplikten in Swedish, from around 30 to around 6%, that led to a decrease in fuel prices around 20%. So there's a drastic change in the incentives that firms face due to climate policy, due to fuel prices. So the main advantages are, of course, that the government doesn't have to tell the firms what to do. Firms know what they can do, and then they can put these measures into practice. Here, all the firms basically use the same technology. They all use diesel-driven trucks. And the question is, how can they now reduce emissions? And what we see is that they basically become better at logistics, they become better at loading the trucks, so they're able to reduce their emissions while still using the same technology. So this is organizational efficiency, so they're improving how they use their resources. So this would be one example of how market-based climate policy is able to direct firms to do what is efficient. It has also a positive effect on innovations, and there is not a ceiling to this basically. So by increasing prices, we can expect that firms will continue doing this, and then further along the way even introduce new technologies. So overall, climate policy has led to a decoupling, an absolute decoupling in the Swedish trucking industry, where we've seen that volumes have increased by around 25%. At the same time, emissions have decreased by around 5%. So we are in a situation where we're able to do more with less. This is one of the central results from the study. What we also see is that it is more of the larger firms have a better ability to react to these price increases. So their market share has grown over the time period that we look at, while the smaller firms' market share has declined. Overall, nevertheless, the market is still to be considered highly competitive with very low concentration ratio. So the competition is still high among the trucking firms. Productivity is up. We developed a measure for productivity, which basically relates the sales of the firms, which we deflate using a sector-specific deflator, and relate these sales to the potential of the goods they could have transported over the distance that they drive. And there we see that there is a considerable increase in productivity over the time period, and that productivity gains are focused, or they're mainly in the largest trucking firms. But nevertheless, we do see productivity increases across all size group of trucking firms. The sector's long-term transition will of course depend eventually upon usage of electric vehicles, electric trucks. So far, we have not seen basically any usage of large, heavy electric trucks. So we have a data set that has information on over 10,000 trucks per year, and we can track how far they go, and it's basically just 100 electric trucks in the data set. So what we do see these efficiency gains over the short and medium term. For the long term, there will need to be considerable investments into the charging infrastructure and also into electric vehicles. None of that have we seen so far. The policy lessons that emerge from the study are that although firms use similar equipment, it is how they use the equipment that will lead to decreases in emissions and increases in productivity. So that's something that has not been shown before. How firms using the same inputs, the same machinery, how they're able to become more efficient, more productive, and how this varies across firms that have more or less of these resources. So what we see is that the large trucking firms, which basically have many trucks to optimize, they have logistics centers, they are able to reduce their emissions, increase productivity far more than the smaller trucking firms that do not have this ability. So the study is unique as we're able to track tens of thousands of trucks belonging to the whole trucking sector in Sweden over a 12-year time period. So we're able to link each truck. We know how much each truck drives, how heavy the truck is, and we know who owns the truck. So we're basically able to see how increases in fuel prices, primarily driven by environmental policy, how they impact firms' decisions, how to use their trucks, how much to drive with each individual truck, and to relate this to the increases in fuel prices. What we do find then is that the largest trucking firms, which own logistics centers and are able to optimize over a large number of vehicles, that they are reacting the very most. Smaller trucking firms, which do not have these abilities, are then not able to optimize quite as much, but nevertheless, we do see optimizations in all of the different trucking firm groups.